For most of a century, a handful of companies owned music. Not a song here or their music itself. They controlled which artists the world heard, how much a piece of sound cost, and the only roads that music could travel to reach your ears. It was one of the most profitable empires entertainment had ever built, printing money from something people could not get any other way. And then, in the space of about 2 years, a free program written by a college student in his spare time set the whole thing on fire. The empire did not just lose money. It lost control of its own product, permanently, and it never truly got it back. But here is the part most people forget: the fire alone did not destroy them. What turned a crisis into a collapse was the empire's own reaction to it, a decision so arrogant, so exactly wrong, that it took a wound and made it fatal. To understand how the giants of music fell, you first have to understand what they were really selling. Because it was never quite what you think. Here is the thesis of this entire story, and everything that follows is the proof of it. The record labels did not sell music. They sold scarcity. Think about what it actually took, for most of the 20th century, to hear a specific song whenever you wanted. You needed a physical object, a record, a tape, a compact disc that had to be manufactured in a factory, shipped in trucks, stocked in stores, and bought with your money. Every step of that chain was a gate, and the labels owned the gates. That was their real empire, not the melodies, but the control of the only path between the artist and the listener. As long as sound had to live on a physical thing that cost money to make and move, the labels held all the power. They could set the price, decide who got heard, and take the largest share for themselves. Their fortune was never really built on music. It was built on the fact that music was hard to copy and hard to move. Remember that, because it is the exact foundation that was about to vanish. And for a while, that foundation made them richer than ever. The arrival of the compact disc, in particular, was a gold rush. Here was a product that was cheap to manufacture, marketed as flawless and permanent, and sold at a price far above what it cost to make. Even better, the CD convinced millions of people to buy music they already owned all over again, replacing their old vinyl and tapes disc by disc. The same album sold to the same person 2 or 3 times over. A disc that cost a fraction of a dollar to press could carry a price many times higher, and the difference flowed straight upward. Money poured in. The industry consolidated into a small club of dominant labels, and life at the top was very good. But comfort at the summit hides a specific kind of danger. When an empire is making that much money from one particular arrangement of the world, it stops being able to imagine that arrangement ever ending. It mistakes the moment for a law of nature. And so, at the exact peak of their power, the people who ran music were the least prepared for the one thing that could take it all away: a world where copying and moving a song suddenly cost nothing at all. That world arrived quietly, at the end of the 1990s, in the form of software. A young programmer named Sean Fanning built a simple program, called Napster, with a deceptively small idea: let people share the music files already sitting on their computers directly with one another. No factory. No trucks. No store. Just a connection between one listener and another, copying a song in minutes for absolutely nothing. On its own, one person sharing one file was trivial. But the internet turned that trivial act into a chain reaction. Every person who joined brought their entire collection with them, which drew in more people, who brought more music, and the library exploded outward until, very quickly, nearly any song ever recorded was available to anyone, for free. The physical object, the disc that had been the foundation of the entire empire, had just been made completely optional. And most of the executives who ran music barely understood what they were looking at until it was already everywhere. The speed was the terrifying part. This was not a slow decline, it was a wildfire. In a matter of months, the program went from a curiosity to tens of millions of users, a huge share of them students on fast campus connections, trading music around the clock. An entire generation was quietly learning a new and permanent expectation, that music was something you simply had, instantly, for free, whenever you wanted it. That expectation, once learned, could never be unlearned. And this is the moment where the empire's foundation didn't crack, it evaporated. Their power had rested entirely on scarcity, on being the only road between artist and listener. Now there were infinite roads, none of which they controlled, and none of which cost anything. The gates they had spent decades building were still standing, grand as ever. It's just that the crowds were now walking straight past them, through walls that no longer existed. The empire still looked mighty. But the ground it stood on was already gone. Now we reached the decision that turned a disaster into a downfall, the single most important part of this story. Faced with this, the industry had a choice. They could accept that the world had changed, and race to give people a legal, convenient way to get music in this new form. Or they could try to force the world back into its old shape. They chose to fight. The industry's trade group went to war, first shutting down the original program in court, which changed nothing, because a dozen more sprang up in its place. And then they did something that will be studied as a case study in self-destruction for as long as businesses exist. They began suing their own customers. Ordinary people. Students. Families. Individuals were pursued for staggering sums over a handful of songs downloaded at home, penalties that could reach tens of thousands of dollars per track, aimed at teenagers and single parents who had shared a few files. Each case was meant as a public warning, a single person made an example of, so that millions of others would be too afraid to do the same. The strategy was meant to frighten the public back into the stores. Instead, it did the opposite. It told an entire generation that the music industry now saw its own listeners as the enemy. They took a business problem, how do we sell in this new world, and turned it into a moral war against the very people they needed to survive. You cannot sue your way back to a monopoly the technology has already erased. And every lawsuit only deepened the public's contempt for the empire it was fighting to save. And here is the final, bitter irony. There was a fortune to be made in this new world, an enormous one. The demand for music had not fallen, it had exploded. People wanted music more than ever. Someone simply had to sell it to them in a form that fit the new reality, easy, instant, and fairly priced. But the companies that seized that opportunity were, for the most part, not the record labels. It was a computer company that first sold songs cleanly, one at a time, and later a streaming service that let you rent all the music in the world for the price of a single old CD each month. The value moved from the people who owned the music to the people who controlled how it was delivered. The old labels survived, but as diminished, dependent partners, taking a slice of platforms built by others, on terms they no longer set. The empire that once owned every road between artist and listener now paid a toll to travel roads that other people had built. They did not vanish. But they were never the emperors again. So what is the pattern here, the one this channel keeps finding in every fallen empire? It is this: the music giants never understood what business they were actually in. They thought they were selling music, when they were really selling scarcity, and the moment technology made their product infinite, the true source of their power was gone, no matter how big they still looked. Their fatal error was not failing to see the fire. It was refusing to accept what the fire meant, and spending their strength trying to rebuild a wall the world had already walked through. Every empire that has ever fallen this way made the same mistake. It confused the thing it sold with the scarcity that made it valuable, and when that scarcity disappeared, it chose to fight reality instead of learning to live in it. So let me leave you with the question that fells giants. If the one thing that made your empire valuable suddenly became free to everyone tomorrow, would you adapt, or would you go to war to protect a wall that no longer holds anything back? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.